Graham, help me out here. This patchwork quilt of inconsistent state-by-state regulations, it's an enormous frustration, I know, for people trying to plan holidays in the upcoming school break. How do you make sense of it all?
Well, Peter, I mean, it's very difficult to, I must admit. And I think the AHPPC, the group of CHOs, has got a lot to answer for here because they're clearly a dysfunctional group. They can't agree by the looks on anything. And when you look at some of the states, New South Wales in particular, they generally have done pretty well. And they look at the overall risk rather than some of the states just shut down and keep things shut. I call it panic and paralysis, and that seems to be their two main strategies in some of these, and WA is a classic example.
But how can we be 18 months into this pandemic, not have a consistent treatment of hot zones and not have a consistent treatment of border closures? People are having a lot of trouble when they book and these things happen, getting refunds back. This is killing tourism in Australia, given the fact that we haven't got the international visitor market coming in either.
No, look, you're absolutely right. It's tough on travel, tourism, airlines, airports, and a lot of other people. But there is no logic to it. There's no logic to Victoria's widespread lockdown, locking down the whole state with a few virus infections, and there should be. The AHPPC is there to coordinate this, to try to make sure they've got the same basic approach, and it's very different. Queensland looks like it's just open to Victorians in time for the holidays, but with a few infections in Victoria, it looks like it's under control. New South Wales, hopefully are handling their infections much more sensibly, as they have done in the past. So we'll see how that goes. But it's 100%, I agree with you. It is totally illogical. And the way these states are handling it just shows that the CHOs, some of the CHOs, clearly have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, look, and people look to New South Wales, they can see that, Gladys Berejiklian will at least let the system try and suppress the virus. She's not running eradication. People know that they can book a trip to somewhere in New South Wales with a little bit of confidence. We're not seeing that elsewhere. Interesting statistics. Airlines UK say some 32 countries will be exempting travellers from quarantine if they're fully vaccinated, and 27 countries don't require you to undergo any testing if you've had both jabs. Surely with the rollout of vaccines, if you want to have an incentive to get vaccinated, what about some system where being fully vaccinated lets you move around at least our country a bit more freely? Isn't that something we should be discussing?
Yeah, I think in fairness, the PM has been discussing this, has been putting this out, but some of the premiers say it would be too hard to look at. So. But obviously that's one of the things that we should be doing, just to make sure the incentive is there to vaccinate. And obviously when travel comes back, as it will over the next 6 months, I believe, the international travel, you probably almost certainly will have to be vaccinated to visit most cities. And people coming in or going out and coming back in will need to be fully vaccinated. So, but an incentive to avoid these lockdowns, to be, if you are vaccinated, obviously would be a good start. But I think the better start is not to lock down unless you have to. And I think the New South Wales Premier has made that clear. She's there for all her residents to try to make sure that she doesn't make their life a lot harder than it needs to be. Some of the other states seem to have no concept of this.
Well, you know the sector better than anyone in the country. I heard you just say that you think the international borders will be open by the end of the year. How sure are you about that?
Oh, look, I'm not saying they'll be totally open, but I think we will have more routes open. The main thing is with the vaccination that people who can get hospitalised or can die from a COVID are vaccinated, are fully vaccinated. Mm-hmm. And that should have happened just about by now. It certainly should be totally finished by the end of July. And it's just inevitable that what's been happening in the last few weeks here in Victoria, now Sydney, is going to happen over the next 6 months. And at some stage, and almost for certain over the next few months, this virus is going to be endemic in Australia. The vulnerable people, if they're vaccinated, haven't got anything to worry about. And we've got to learn to live with it. It's going to be around forever, or at least for the next 5 or 10 years. I think every expert predicts that. So we've just got to learn to live with it, get on with life, make sure the vulnerable are protected by being vaccinated.
Yeah, I think that's the conversation we're really all starting to have, at least I know amongst communities. People are talking about when the virus enters Australia in a more fulsome way, not if. Graham Turner, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Bert.